Neil McTaggart's Crossing, episode number 9, a story of 1920s Scottish immigration to Canada. Episode 9, The Town. The frost had lifted a little by the time Robert said, "You'd best come with me to town today, lad." Neil was glad to go. The farm had begun to feel heavy with silence. They loaded the cart with eggs, a sack of oats, and a few jars of honey that Robert traded each month. The horse stamped in the cold, eager to move. The road wound along the river, then climbed through a line of dark spruce. The air smelled of wood smoke and frozen earth. Neil's breath came out in small clouds. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The only sounds, the creak of the wheels and the soft jangle of the harness. "You'll see a fair bit of the world in town," Robert said at last. "Don't stare too much. Folk don't like that." "I won't," Neil said, but his eyes were already full of curiosity. They reached the edge of town just before noon. The place seemed to grow out of the snow itself. Rows of wooden buildings with wide porches, a few tall chimneys, and a church steeple rising like a finger against the sky. To Neil, it felt both strange and familiar. It had the bustle of Kilbirnie, but not its roar. Here the air was clean, though heavy with the smell of horses, leather, and coffee. Robert pulled the cart to a stop outside the general store. "I'll see to the grain," he said. "You take the eggs to Mrs Brant's. She runs the cafe 2 doors down. She'll know what to pay." Neil lifted the crate carefully and crossed the street. His boots sank into the thawing mud, and he could feel the chill seeping through the soles. The cafe was warm inside. Steam fogged the windows, and the smell of soup and bread wrapped around him like a blanket. Behind the counter stood a woman with her hair pulled tight and pinned high, a few silver strands escaping near her temples. She wore a dark dress buttoned to the throat, an apron starched so stiff it almost shone. There was something of the old country about her, upright, exact, not unkind, but certain of herself. Her face had that firm, set look Neil remembered from his grandmother, who had kept the Sabbath as if it were a wall around the week. He could almost hear her voice again. "Keep your back straight, boy, and your words few." "You must be Robert's nephew," the woman said. Her voice carried no softness, yet it wasn't harsh either, just clear, like clean glass. "The one from Scotland." Neil nodded. "Yes, ma'am, from Kilbirnie." "Well, set those eggs down before your fingers freeze." She came forward and lifted the crate with quick, practiced hands, counting each egg under her breath. When she finished, she handed him a few coins. "Fair trade," she said. Tell your uncle I'll take another dozen next week." Neil stood there, awkward, not sure if he should go. She studied him a moment, then nodded toward a stool near the stove. "Sit a bit. I can see the cold's bitten you." He obeyed. The warmth crept slowly into his hands. She poured coffee into a tin mug and slid it across the counter. "There," she said. "That'll set you right." The drink was bitter but strong. Neil swallowed carefully. "Thank you. You miss home?" she asked, turning back to her work. Neil thought about it. "Aye, but it's different here. Quieter. Back home the air was thick. You could hardly breathe it. The mills never stopped. You'd wake to the whistle and go to sleep to it. Everything clattered and shouted. Even the rain sounded tired." Mrs. Brant gave a small smile. "You get used to the quiet. It's not emptiness, it's space. Most folk don't know what to do with it when they first come." Neil looked around. Two loggers were sitting near the stove, their coats steaming. They were laughing over something small, the kind of easy laughter he hadn't had since leaving Scotland. A man at the corner table was reading aloud from a newspaper to another who couldn't, the words rolling like slow waves. He recognized one of them as the parson who offered him a sandwich on the train when he first arrived. But no sooner had he seen him, and he was gone. Neil remembered that that act of kindness, of sharing food, lived on, long after he had ever met the parson concerned. Mrs. Brant moved among them without fuss. She spoke little, but saw everything. Who needed a refill? Who was short of coins? Who'd had too much to drink the night before? There was discipline in her kindness, a Puritan shape to it. Neil admired that. It reminded him of the woman who had kept his family alive through winters when the men's wages ran out. When Robert came in later, he found Neil still sitting by the stove. "Done your trade?" "Aye," Neil said. "She paid fair." Mrs. Brant looked up from wiping a table. "He's a polite one, your nephew. Doesn't say more than he needs to." Robert smiled faintly. "That'll do him no harm." As they left, she nodded once, the same brisk motion as before. "You tell your uncle those eggs are a blessing. Hard to find hens that lay so well this time of year." Neil touched the brim of his cap. "Aye, ma'am." Outside, the sun was already low. They loaded the supplies into the cart, and Neil climbed up beside Robert. As they left the town behind, he looked back once. The cafe's windows glowed faintly, steam still misting the glass. "Does it ever feel lonely here?" he asked. Robert flicked the reins. "Sometimes, but not as much as you'd think. The land's quiet. Aye, but it listens. You'll see." They rode on. The snow began to fall again. Slow, round flakes that softened everything they touched. Neil pulled his collar up and watched the trees pass. He thought of Kilbirnie's black roofs, the hiss of steam, and his grandmother's voice calling him to wash his hands before supper. Here, the only sound was the creak of the wagon and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves. When they reached home, Thomas was waiting by the stove. "You bring tea?" he asked. Robert nodded and set down the parcel. and a bit of talk from town. Anything worth hearing? Thomas asked. Not much, Robert said. Just folk working, eating, and getting older. Neil smiled faintly. It sounded peaceful, and for now that was enough. That night, lying in bed, he thought again of Mrs Brant, the tight hair, the upright posture, the eyes that missed nothing. She had reminded him of strength that didn't need noise, the kind that held families together when everything else failed. And for the first time since leaving home, he felt not a stranger, but someone beginning to belong.